Hello, Abnormal Investigations. I've got another encounter for you, except for today it's going to be two encounters on this one video. Had a couple of short ones, so I thought I would put them together. That way we could get a full video out of it. I want to thank each and every one of you for your support and for standing up for Hunter and everything that y'all have done. Y'all are an amazing group. We're an amazing family. And it's making those pretty angry that went against Hunter that we are standing together. I'm feeling the heat more and more we win, so let's keep winning. I grew up spending the summers out in Montana, and I still make it out there when I can. Something that's been drawing a lot of national attention lately is the disappearance of Native women, especially in Crow County, which expands far beyond the reaches of the actual Crow Indian Reservation. I first started hearing about these disappearances back in 2014. But every year, there are hundreds of new missing persons cases reported in this region. Much of my family still lives in Montana, and they're pretty plugged in with the local basketball community. If you don't know, high school basketball is extremely popular in Montana, and many teams spend quite a bit of time traveling to and from games. My cousin recently spoke with someone who wished to remain anonymous from the Hardin basketball team. Hardin, Montana is on the border of the Crow Indian Reservation, where many of these disappearances are happening. The following is my cousin's telling of a native problem in our region. We were on the bus traveling to Billings Mountain for a away game. We played a good game, but lost 28-24. We were on the bus back to the Hardin when we saw something running alongside the bus. It was dark, so I couldn't really tell what it was, but I figured it was probably just a stray dog or a coyote or something along those lines. We got back to the high school, and I was getting into my truck when I saw something run from behind the bus. There were still a few girls waiting to get picked up by their parents, so I grabbed my Ruger Blackhawk revolver from the glove compartment and extra rounds, and I started walking slowly to where I'd seen the movement from. I turned on the flashlight and I looked around. I couldn't see anything, so I went back to my truck. The last girl's parents picked her up, and I turned on my truck. The high school backs up to the open space off of North Mitchell Road, which is the road I have to take to get home. I was flipping through the radio stations trying to get the forecast because it was supposed to snow later that night. I happened to glance up and saw something running behind my truck and in the rearview mirror. I quietly cussed to myself before coming to a gradual stop. Once again, I grabbed my revolver and flashlight and started to open the door when something slammed into the outside of the door, effectively boxing me in. What I saw next was the stuff of nightmares. There was a face pressed up against my driver's side window, but it wasn't the face of a human or any animal that I've ever seen. It had a short dark hair. It had big yellow eyes with tiny black pupils. It had tall pointy ears on the top of its head and long sharp teeth hanging out over its mouth, which was shaped almost like a snout, reminding me of a baboon more or less. It was breathing on the window, causing it to fog up. I was honestly stuck in a state of shock, and for the moment I forgot what I was holding in the revolver. Almost as soon as I did, I could see the eyes shift, to go from looking at me to down at the gun, and then back up at me. What happened next sends shivers down my spine. It's twisted up in a cruel, gruesome smile. I mean, its mouth was so twisted. Before I could even raise my hand, it leapt back away from the truck, and that's when I got a good look at the rest of its body. It was very dark, but it did seem to resemble a large dog of sorts with a thick dark mane, but mixed with the body of a human, if that makes sense. It had wide muscular shoulders like a football player and arms that hung down with its knuckles touching the ground. It appeared to be crouching down, but even in the position it was still almost eye level with the cab of my Ford F-150. Fearful that it might lunge back at the truck, I shifted into drive and I began to pull forward. Instead of slamming back into the door, it jumped high into the air and landed on top of my truck, denting the roof before jumping off to the other side, running off into the night. I swear I almost had a heart attack and drove the long way home, frequently checking my mirrors to make sure it wasn't following me. This experience left me extremely concerned for the safety of the people in my community. I cannot help but wonder if this is what has taken the little girls in our community and the adult women. We have many missing that have not been found, and many that go missing almost every year. It sounds to me like you got a hunter in your area, and it seems to not be afraid to hunt. I hate to say it, but those girls that were taken, they probably became its dinner, and they'll later probably find their remains if they're lucky. Most of the time, I hear they don't. I wouldn't play around with this thing. I think you got something pretty dangerous in your area. And, like I tell people, report that you have a prowler if you have to. But, yeah, I would be very careful in this area, and I'm also going to look into this area more. The second one I got for you guys, the second encounter, says that he stared in the eyes of this creature. This happened 13 years ago. I was 33, living alone in Montana. I'm a hunter like my father and his father, so I have had many experiences with animals. This morning I planned to go on a camping trip by myself. The spot I had planned to go deep into the woods into a remote campsite. I drank a mug of coffee, packed my bags, and grabbed my belt, which had a .500 Magnum in its holster. I called my brother and asked him to come pick up my dog and take her back to his place. Then I departed. Nothing much happened on the drive there, although when I got to the trail everything went silent. I assumed it was because I had just pulled in and continued to the path. The entire hike I never heard a bird, bug, or even the rustling of branches. Silence. After around 2 hours of this, I was officially on edge. I kept my hand on my gun because obviously I was being stalked by some kind of predator. After 3 hours of hiking, I came to the campsite. As I was setting up my tent, the sounds of nature resumed. To say this campsite was beautiful would be an understatement. I was on the ridge overlooking a small town I lived in. I threw my bag and my tent and started unpacking everything. Once again, everything fell silent. The silence was broken by the sounds of the trees knocking against each other in the wind. I set up my sleeping tent and threw my sleeping bag in. When I left the tent, I took a can of beans out of my food bag, then put the rest in a tree. That's when I heard the twig snap around 20 feet into the woods. I turned around, my hand on my gun, and watched the woods, still and unmoving. I saw nothing. As I tried to get the fire to cook my food, I heard rustling, followed by frenetic, massive footsteps. I pulled out my gun and once again turned around. It was so menacing that it was hard to even build my fire for feeling being watched and hearing the snapping of the twigs. The iron sights were aimed at the center mass of what I can only describe as a demon. It had the legs and horns of a goat, and it stood on 2 feet. It had brown furry body and a human-looking arms. It had the face of a kangaroo, and its eyes, oh God, they were pure malice. It lunged closer to me, and I fired a shot. In response to that, it screamed. It sounded like a fox, a deer's mating call, and with the most painful, blood-curdling human scream I'd ever heard. I blinked, and the thing was right in front of me. Its snout was touching mine, and those yellow eyes, lizard-like eyes, were stabbing into my soul. I knew that if I moved, it would kill me. I don't know how I knew that, but I just knew it. I could feel it. I slowed my breathing, and as I did, the creature pushed me to the ground without breaking eye contact. I got back up and just stood there. It came up to me again, and it screamed right into my face. This scream seemed to shake the entire forest, and all in response, I threw my hands up and I screamed back. It just kept staring at me, toying with me. I put my gun directly to its throat, and I screamed again. And I fired, and as I pulled the trigger, it ducked. I screamed, "Back off!" It stood there, so I pulled the trigger again. With my ears ringing, I screamed once again, and the creature ran back into the woods. I began to pack up my stuff, and whenever I looked up, I saw it, staring at me. It followed me down the path and to my motorcycle. I sped out of there at least 30 miles an hour over the speed limit. I heard it scream one last time as I got onto the main road that makes it to the town I live in. Something in me wants to go back there, and I want to see if I can kill this thing. but something tells me that if I go back, I won't get another chance to come back home. I would agree with you. Number one, I'm just going to say this right off. I don't believe it meant to kill you right at that time. It might have planned on playing with you, then killing you, but if it wanted you dead, I think it would have done it immediately when it threw you down. You were you were its prey at that time. The fact that it let you back up and do what you did with the gun and everything really, really surprises me. But if I were you, I would not go back, because if you go back, I do not believe you'll return from those woods, because I think the second time that it attacks you, it'll be over, and I think you have too much. Your reaction time's a little slow, because something comes at me like that, I'm not going to give it time. I'm not going to scream at it. I'm going to focus and do what I've been trained to do. And I'm just giving you advice. I would not go back if I were you. I don't think it would be good for you. Guys, I hope you enjoyed these two encounters, both of them coming out of Montana. Montana seems like a pretty active state. I hope you all have enjoyed this. I've been thinking about doing an encounter from each state in the United States. That might be something that I do. What do y'all think about that? And until next time, guys, keep your head on a swivel. Don't be something's dinner, and we'll see you on the next one.